Antonio Brown just can't stay out of trouble. The former NFL star is already facing attempted murder charges after firing a gun outside a Miami nightclub. But now it's getting worse. A leaked audio just surfaced where Brown seemingly admits he wanted the victim dead. Honestly, it's starting to look like jail time's back on the table.
AB, your days are numbered. And however you want to take that.
I've got all the details. Let's get into it. The incident that changed everything. Antonio Brown has to be one of the biggest trouble magnets the NFL has ever seen. Sure, we've had our fair share of wild personalities, guys like Pac-Man Jones, Aldon Smith, and even Josh Gordon, but none of them brought the same level of chaos and headline drama as Antonio Brown. And now, he's allegedly admitted to murder without even realizing it. But before we dive into that bombshell, let's rewind to where this all started. On May 16th, 2025, former NFL superstar Antonio Brown stepped out of a celebrity boxing event in Miami's Little Haiti neighborhood. What began as a normal evening quickly spiraled into violence. The incident that night wasn't some random act of violence. It was the explosive culmination of a bitter, years-long feud between Antonio Brown and a 41-year-old man named Zulkarnain Kwame Nantambu, someone Brown had known since 2022. To understand just how personal this had become, we need to hear from the victim himself. In an explosive TMZ Sports interview just hours after the shooting, Nantambu described the history of their toxic relationship.
Listen, I spent 40 days in the Dubai jail because we were out there for a Floyd Mayweather fight. He tried to defraud me out of a multi-pendant and a design that I was trying to go talk to, I was going to talk to Floyd about being an ambassador for. I saved him from going to jail in Dubai. He came through with no shirt on, talking to the TSA, the equivalent of TSA customs people, cursing him out. I stepped in, because I'm Muslim, greeted him with salam alaikum, let him know, look, he's in the company of Floyd Mayweather, he's a little crazy. I used the word majnoon, and after 40 minutes, they let him go. Long story short, you know what I mean? He gave me something to hold, but then he backdoored and called the police on me and then got me locked up.
That was their first major fallout, long before the night of the boxing match. Fast forward to May 16th, at a celebrity boxing event hosted by streamer Adin Ross, held in one of Miami's roughest neighborhoods. That long brewing tension between the two finally exploded. According to police reports and eyewitnesses, what started as a verbal argument turned physical. Brown allegedly punched Nantambu, but that was just the beginning. Things quickly spiraled into something far more dangerous. Nantambu's first-hand account of what happened next is chilling.
His story is a half-truth. His story is a non-truth. He's a liar, man. I've been knowing AB since 2021. I have a judgment against AB for 180, and why would I want to even damage that by trying to reach for a moissanite and fork metal chain? He's a liar. If you watch the video, everybody was attacking me. It was a 3v1. 3 dudes. The dude with the green hoodie was with AB. The other little Puerto Rican looking dude that was swinging the bat was with AB, and the rest was aiding security.
What happened next, according to both law enforcement and the victim's own testimony, was something that would forever change both men's lives. Nantambu described the moment Brown allegedly grabbed the gun.
He went, got a gun, ran wild gunfire, and alhamdulillah, I was spared. But when he saw me, I just reminded him of the financial failure that he's been going through. And so he tried to steal off on me, his partners. You could watch the dude with the green hoodie taking off, just getting free shots in while me and AB tussling. You know what I'm saying? Then he went, got a gun, ran after me. I'm already put outside. He went, got a gun, shot wildfire. We fight. He shot at me twice. Praise be to Allah, I wasn't hit. They got children out there selling candy, bro. He could have hit one of them kids.
But here's where this story takes an even more shocking turn. While Antonio Brown has publicly denied the allegations and claimed self-defense, sources suggest that he may have been recorded making statements that could be interpreted as admissions of guilt. These alleged recordings, if they exist, could be the smoking gun that prosecutors need to secure a conviction against one of the NFL's most controversial figures. The most terrifying part of Nantambu's account describes the struggle for the weapon from Antonio.
He runs into me after he shoot me. We tussling for the gun, fighting for the gun, all over the ground. I get
There's
up.
police. There's police here.
Police out there, bro. We holding on the gun for dear life. We both get up off the ground, and then he's when I look up, the police is pointing the gun at us. The sheriff is pointing the gun at us. That's when I throw my hands up. He runs inside, and that's when they run after him.
The aftermath of that night was swift and severe. Police recovered 2 spent shell casings and an empty gun holster at the scene, though notably, no weapon was initially found on Brown himself. But perhaps more damaging than the physical evidence was the digital evidence surveillance footage showing Brown punching Nantambu and cell phone videos capturing him advancing toward his target with a firearm. For Nantambu, the night left him with more than just physical scars. Beyond the bullet graze on his neck, he also sustained a broken finger during the brawl. overall, injuries that required immediate medical attention and would serve as lasting reminders of a night that nearly cost him his life. Nantambu's description of Brown's escape reveals how close this came to being much worse.
And that's why, I just left, and that's why he got detained, because all the kids were saying AB shooting. They went got it, but I wasn't there to give a statement, so I guess he lied to him and said whatever. Somebody tried to rob him, but if you look at the footage, you saw he swung first. Nobody reached for no chain. I didn't have no weapon. It's just falsehood. You feel what I'm saying? And he's out here slandering my name.
The legal implications were immediate and severe. On June 11th, 2025, an arrest warrant was issued charging Brown with attempted murder with a firearm. The warrant, signed by a judge in Miami-Dade County, included a $10,000 bond and stipulated house arrest pending trial if Brown was taken into custody. Yet despite this legal sword hanging over his head, Brown managed to avoid immediate arrest that night and, as of the latest reports, remains at large. But this incident didn't happen in a vacuum. To truly understand the gravity of what allegedly occurred that night in Miami, we need to examine the complex history between Antonio Brown and Zulkarnain Kwame Nantambu. Their relationship reads like a legal thriller, filled with lawsuits over jewelry, accusations of theft, and claims of stalking that date back to their first meeting in 2022. The business relationship between the two men had soured spectacularly over the years. Nantambu had previously filed a lawsuit against Brown in 2022, initially winning a judgment of $968,960, which was later vacated and dismissed. But the legal battles didn't end there. Nantambu was currently seeking $123,600 in federal bankruptcy court, adding another layer of financial tension to their already strained relationship. From Brown's perspective, he painted a very different picture of events. Taking to social media in the aftermath of the incident, Brown claimed that he was jumped and robbed during the incident. He went further, publicly accusing Nantambu of being a fraud, liar, stalker, and criminal, referencing prior incidents including a 2022 jewelry theft and a 2023 assault attempt at Rolling Loud. Brown's defense was clear. He was fighting for my life during the May 16th incident. But Nantambu's TMZ interview directly contradicts Brown's version of events, providing crucial eyewitness testimony that supports the prosecution's case. The evidence, however, seemed to tell a different story. Video footage and witness statements appeared to lean toward Brown being the aggressor, contradicting his claims of self-defense. This created a fascinating legal puzzle. On one hand, you have a man claiming he was defending himself. On the other, you have multiple forms of evidence suggesting he was the one who initiated and escalated the violence. What makes this case even more intriguing is the broader context of Antonio Brown's life at the time of the incident. This wasn't happening to a man at the peak of his career, but rather to someone whose post-NFL life had been marked by a series of increasingly serious legal troubles. From bankruptcy filings claiming $3 million in debts to multiple arrests for failing to pay child support, Brown's life had become a series of legal battles and financial struggles. But perhaps most telling was Brown's own acknowledgement of his behavioral issues. In a revealing 2020 ESPN interview, when asked about accountability for his actions,
I think I could really express my emotion the right way when I get frustrated. So being able to express myself in a positive way when things are not so positive.
Nantambu's final message to Brown in the TMZ interview was both prophetic and chilling.
AB, your days are numbered. And however you want to take that. Not that your days are numbered in life, but the days of the ignorant, wild, foolish, reckless way of living cannot sustain you. You know what I'm saying? You cannot be in society living like this, because you're going to harm somebody, you're going to harm yourself. You have children, man. Have some decency about yourself. Get some help.
To understand how Antonio Brown found himself allegedly firing a gun in a Miami parking lot, we need to examine the systematic destruction of what was once one of the most promising careers in NFL history. The pattern of destruction. Antonio Brown's descent from NFL superstar to wanted fugitive reads like a cautionary tale about unchecked ego, unaddressed mental health issues, and the dangerous combination of fame, money, and unresolved trauma. The May 16th shooting incident wasn't an aberration. It was the inevitable conclusion of a pattern of increasingly erratic and violent behavior that had been escalating for nearly a decade. The early warning signs were there as far back as 2012, though at the time they seemed relatively harmless. Brown was fined $10,000 for unsportsmanlike conduct after running backwards during a punt return touchdown, a showboating move that hinted at the ego that would eventually consume him. What followed was a series of increasingly expensive fines for excessive celebrations, including $24,309 for a pelvic thrusting celebration that suggested a man more concerned with personal attention than team success.
Anytime you don't get a chance to play a game that have narrowed my focus, allowed me to tune out a lot of distractions and be able to achieve my goals as far as being a good player. So having the game taken away from me that many days, been a little frustrated emotionally, but I think I just missed playing.
But the real turning point came in 2018, when Brown's behavior moved beyond the football field and into his personal life. He was accused of throwing furniture from his apartment, nearly hitting a toddler, an incident that he later settled out of court, but which marked the beginning of his most serious legal troubles. This wasn't just poor judgment, it was the first sign of the violent tendencies that would eventually lead to that fateful night in Miami. The pattern that emerged was both predictable and terrifying. Each incident seemed to escalate in severity. Each legal settlement only emboldened him further, and each public controversy fed an ego that seemed to grow more dangerous with every passing month. By 2019, Brown was facing assault allegations from his former trainer Brittany Taylor, accusations that would dog him for years and contribute to his eventual exile from the NFL. The assault lawsuit filed by Taylor painted a disturbing picture of a man who had completely lost any sense of boundaries or consequences. The lawsuit alleged 3 separate incidents of misconduct, including accusations that Brown vehemently denied, but which cost him his opportunity with the New England Patriots after just 1 game. The case was eventually settled out of court in April 2021, but the damage to Brown's reputation was irreversible. What made Brown's behavior particularly troubling was his complete inability to take responsibility for his actions. In that same 2020 ESPN interview, when asked directly about the assault allegations, Brown deflected by saying,
I'm a target, based on the position I'm in. People could say anything they want, and it become public perception.
This victim mentality became a recurring theme in Brown's public statements, a refusal to acknowledge that his own actions might be contributing to his problems. When pressed about whether he felt he needed mental help, Brown responded,
We all need mental help, from our friends, from the people we hang around, from the people we consult with every day. Yeah, we need mental help. I'm like an animal in a cage.
The animal in a cage analogy is particularly chilling when viewed in retrospect. Here was a man who clearly recognized that something was wrong, who understood that he was trapped by his own behavior and the consequences of his actions, but who seemed unable or unwilling to take the steps necessary to change course. The downward spiral accelerated dramatically in 2020 and 2021. Brown was arrested for attacking a moving truck driver, an incident that resulted in a no-contest plea and 2 years of probation. He was suspended by the NFL for misrepresenting his COVID-19 vaccination status, showing a pattern of deception that extended beyond his personal life and into his professional obligations. But perhaps the most telling incident came in January 2022, when Brown dramatically left the field during a game against the New York Jets, removing his jersey and pads in full view of the cameras. This wasn't just poor sportsmanship, it was a public breakdown. A man so consumed by his own grievances that he was willing to abandon his team in the middle of a game. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers released him the next day, effectively ending his NFL career. The post-NFL years brought even more troubling behavior. Brown faced domestic violence charges after allegedly throwing a shoe at his ex-fiancée during an argument in November 2022. He was repeatedly arrested for failing to pay child support, with warrants issued in April, August, and October 2023 for unpaid amounts exceeding $30,000. Perhaps most revealing was Brown's response to these mounting legal troubles. In August 2023, after yet another arrest warrant was issued, Brown claimed that his behavior stemmed from chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, posting on social media that CTE acting up. This wasn't taking responsibility, it was another deflection, another attempt to blame his actions on external factors rather than addressing the real issues. The financial troubles that led to Brown filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in May 2024, owing $2.93 million to 8 creditors, only added to the pressure cooker of his life. Here was a man who had earned over $80 million during his NFL career, now claiming assets of $50,000 or less while owing millions to creditors. The bankruptcy filing revealed a man whose life was completely out of control, whose poor decisions had consequences that extended far beyond his personal relationships. The relationship between Brown and Zulkarnain Kwame Nantambu that would eventually explode into violence that night in Miami was itself a product of this pattern. Their initial business relationship had soured over jewelry disputes and unpaid debts, another example of Brown's inability to maintain professional relationships or meet his financial obligations. But what makes the May 16th incident particularly disturbing disturbing is how it represents the logical endpoint of this pattern of escalating violence and decreasing impulse control. From throwing furniture that nearly hit a child, to allegedly assaulting women, to attacking delivery drivers, to finally allegedly firing a gun at another human being, each incident built upon the last, each boundary crossed, made the next transgression easier to justify. The most chilling aspect of this progression is how Brown seemed to learn all the wrong lessons from each incident. Instead of recognizing that his behavior was the problem, he became increasingly convinced that he was the victim, that everyone was out to get him, that his actions were justified by the circumstances. This victim mentality, combined with access to weapons and a history of violence, created a dangerous situation that finally exploded that night in Miami. In that 2020 ESPN interview, when asked if he owed anyone an apology,
I think I owe the whole NFL apology and my past behavior. I think I could have done a lot of things better.
but when asked specifically about the women who had accused him,
I feel like I never really got any conflict with no woman. I just feel like I'm a target.
this contradiction, acknowledging the need to apologize while simultaneously denying responsibility, perfectly encapsulates the mindset that led to the May 16th incident. Here was a man capable of recognizing that something was wrong, but completely unable or unwilling to take genuine responsibility for his actions. The reckoning and what comes next. As we approach the final chapter of this story, we're left with more questions than answers about what really happened that night in Miami and what those alleged recordings might contain. The case against Antonio Brown for attempted murder represents more than just another legal battle for a troubled former athlete. It's a potential reckoning for a man whose entire post-NFL life has been defined by his ability to escape meaningful consequences for increasingly serious crimes. The evidence against Brown appears overwhelming on the surface. Police have surveillance footage showing Brown punching Nantambu, cell phone videos capturing him advancing with a firearm, witness statements naming him as the shooter, and physical evidence including 2 spent shell casings and an empty gun holster. But the most damaging evidence might be something the public hasn't seen yet, those alleged recordings where Brown may have admitted to the shooting. The nature of these recordings remains shrouded in mystery, but their existence suggests that Brown may have made statements to individuals who were secretly recording their conversations. This wouldn't be unprecedented in his case history. Brown has a well-documented pattern of making inflammatory statements on social media and in private conversations that later become public, often to his detriment. What makes this case particularly compelling from a legal standpoint is how it seems to represent the culmination of all of Brown's previous behaviors and legal troubles. The attempted murder charge comes on top of his existing bankruptcy case, where he's been accused of hiding assets and failing to comply with court orders. It follows years of domestic violence allegations, child support issues, and a pattern of violent behavior that has only escalated over time. The victim in this case, Zulkarnain Kwame Nantambu, represents an interesting figure in his own right. Far from being an innocent bystander, Nantambu was arrested on June 26, 2025 for protesting during the Super Bowl Licks halftime show, charged with resisting an officer and disturbing the peace, highlighting his own history of controversial actions. This complexity adds layers to the narrative and could potentially be used by Brown's defense team to argue that Nantambu was not an innocent victim, but rather a provocateur who contributed to the escalation of violence. However, the legal reality is that regardless of Nantambu's character or past actions, allegedly shooting someone remains attempted murder. The prosecution's case seems to rest on a simple narrative. Antonio Brown got angry, grabbed a gun, and fired shots at another human being. If the alleged recordings exist and contain admissions of guilt, this case could be over before it truly begins. The timeline of events since the May 16th incident has been particularly telling. Despite the arrest warrant being issued on June 11, 2025, Brown has remained at large with no reports of his arrest. This suggests either that law enforcement has been unable to locate him, or more troubling, that Brown may have fled the jurisdiction to avoid arrest. Recent searches for updates have yielded no new developments, indicating that Brown has successfully evaded capture for months. This ability to remain free while facing such serious charges raises important questions about the justice system and how it treats celebrity defendants. The $10,000 bond set in the warrant seems remarkably low for an attempted murder charge, particularly given Brown's history of failing to appear for court dates and his apparent current status as a fugitive. The house arrest conditions stipulated in the warrant become meaningless if the defendant can't be located and arrested in the first place. Brown's public statements since the incident have been characteristically defiant and self-serving. Rather than expressing remorse for the shooting or concern for the victim, Brown has focused on blaming the media for his situation, continuing his pattern of refusing to take responsibility for his actions. This refusal to show genuine remorse or accountability will likely be used against him if and when he's eventually brought to trial. The broader implications of this case extend beyond just Antonio Antonio Brown's personal legal troubles. This case represents a test of whether the justice system can effectively hold accountable individuals who have repeatedly escaped meaningful consequences for their actions. Brown's entire post-NFL career has been defined by his ability to settle lawsuits, pay fines, and move on to the next controversy without ever facing jail time for his alleged crimes. If Brown is eventually captured and convicted on the attempted murder charge, he could face decades in prison, effectively ending any possibility of redemption or comeback. If he continues to evade capture or manages to beat the charges, it will send a message that wealth and fame can still provide insulation from the consequences of even the most serious violent crimes. The psychological profile that emerges from years of documented behavior suggests a man who has become increasingly disconnected from reality and consequence. Brown's 2023 claim that his behavior stems from CTE might be the closest he's come to acknowledging that something is fundamentally wrong, but even that statement was couched as an excuse rather than a genuine plea for help. Looking at the totality of evidence and behavior patterns, the May 16th shooting appears to be the inevitable result of years of escalating violence and decreasing impulse control. From the early on-field incidents to the furniture throwing, from the sexual assault allegations to the domestic violence charges, each incident built upon the last to create a person capable of grabbing a gun and firing it at another human being over a personal dispute. The alleged recordings, if they exist and contain what prosecutors believe they contain, could represent the final piece of evidence needed to secure a conviction. But even without those recordings, the physical evidence and witness testimony appear strong enough to support the attempted murder charges. The real question isn't whether Brown committed the crime, but whether he'll ever be held accountable for it. The impact of this case extends beyond Brown himself to the broader conversation about athlete behavior and accountability. Brown's career represents a cautionary tale about what happens when talent is allowed to excuse increasingly serious behavioral problems. From his early days with the Pittsburgh Steelers to his final NFL game with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Brown was repeatedly given second chances despite mounting evidence that he was a danger to himself and others. As this case continues to unfold, with Brown still at large and the alleged recordings still unrevealed, we're left to wonder whether this will finally be the incident that brings meaningful consequences for Antonio Brown's actions. The attempted murder charge represents the most serious legal jeopardy he has ever faced, but his ability to remain free months after the warrant was issued suggests that even now, he may be able to escape the full weight of justice. The story of Antonio Brown and the May 16th shooting is ultimately a story about consequences, or the lack thereof. For years, Brown has been able to lawyer his way out of serious trouble, pay his way out of lawsuits, and charm his way back into the public's good graces. But attempted murder is different. This isn't a civil lawsuit that can be settled or a misdemeanor that can be pleaded down. This is a felony charge that could result in decades in prison, and no amount of talent, charisma, or money may be able to save him this time. Whether those alleged recordings exist and what they might contain remains one of the most intriguing aspects of this case. If Brown really was recorded admitting to the shooting, it would represent the ultimate irony. A man who made his career catching passes, finally caught by his own words. But even if those recordings never surface, the mountain of other evidence suggests that Antonio Brown's long run from accountability may finally be coming to an end. That brings us to the end of this video. For more interesting videos like this, click on the cards on your screen.